For those of you who saw my review of The Forest is the Path, you'll know that I found it to be a very cohesive album with beautiful lyrics from Gary Lightbody and for the most part some very well staged music. Well, now the band are back with the Deluxe version, and indeed, instead of these simply being offcuts from the album recording sessions, it would appear that the band had such a good experience working on the album with producer Fraser T. Smith that they simply couldn't wait to get back in the studio and deliver some new songs. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 new songs, the new remix of This Is the Sound of Your Voice, plus the rather interesting book that Gary Lightbody has put out as a companion piece to the album. Indeed, we kick things off with But I'll Keep Trying, which was also released as a single. And I suppose if you're going to release a single from this batch of tracks, this would be the one to go with. It feels the most anthemic out of the songs. I think it has a good chorus, and I would say it is the most memorable, especially on a first listen. But a common theme you're going to find as I talk about these songs is I don't feel that it's overly essential. And also, even though I know that these are new tracks, they're not necessarily from the original album recording sessions, I can't help but place in my head, place these songs on the album and question how the album would sound if these tracks were a part of it. And I'm not convinced that But I'll Keep Trying would really add anything to what is already a great album. This Is the Silence, I think, is also a lovely track with a good chorus. But this is the moment where I'm going to have to confess something to you. You see, I listened to the deluxe version on Spotify, and when this song came on, I genuinely thought it was an advert. There was something about that piano intro which really does feel like retail music for me. But aside from that, as I said, I do think it's a lovely song with a good chorus. The two next, What's Left in the Light and Waking Up Now, I'm actually going to tackle together. As each time that I've listened to these new tracks, the two have kind of conflated together for me. I've not really heard where one ends and the other starts, and overall my impression is that these are lovely songs to listen to in the moment, but not overly distinct or memorable. That said, Falling Through All This Time, I think is a song that would really work on the album. I think there is a cohesion to it that matches alongside those existing 12 tracks. I especially love that almost pleading chorus, to have faith. And to me it feels like Lightbody isn't necessarily directing it at anyone outside of himself, more than he is directing it actually towards himself. Overall, I think these songs, in general, do maintain that kind of intimacy and interrogation of Forest is the Path, and I definitely agree with something that I said in my original review, actually, is that the band's sound revitalised. These are very nice, well-written tracks, but at the same time, I will admit I don't feel like they're overly essential, and I quite like the fact that they're their own little thing kind of to the side. We have the remix of This Is the Sound of Your Voice. In general, I'm not big on remix tracks, and that's not really any different here. This Is the Sound of Your Voice is a real highlight for me on the album, and what I think really works with that song is the storytelling in the lyrics. Those opening verses, to me, feel almost like a novel, and that we have this moment, and each time we sort of take a step back, and that picture is bigger and bigger as we go on. The remix, of course, doesn't have that, and I think as a result loses something. And I'm not really sure what the album or what the remix track replaces that with. What did work for me, however, is this new book. This is really quite unique. The only other thing I can think of is I believe there was a Bruce Springsteen album where there was a book to go alongside it. If you know any more about that, let me know in the comments. Or if you can find another example where something like this has occurred, it's really unique to me. But the kind of, I guess if you could refer to an album as introverted, it would be this one. And so I think if you're going to have a book to go alongside an album, this is the one to go with. And I really applaud, I guess, the ballsiness of Gary Lightbody to be so intimate, not just on the album, but on this book. You see, this book isn't just the making of the album, although there are some really great sort of highlight passages, if you like, where Lightbody talks about the album. Never Really Tire gets a bit of he talks about a bit, and I particularly liked him talking about writing the bridge for Everything's Here and Nothing's Lost. But I guess the central crux of the book is, unfortunately, Lightbody lost his father at the end of 2019. And so much of what we learn in this book is to do with that passing and Lightbody trying to accept that and move on from that. He discloses that he couldn't find any tears when it initially happened, and he had this feeling of almost numbness for about a year or so afterwards. I'm going to take a second to say that I want to write songs myself. I have original songs on the channel. This idea of, for me, kind of numbness and apathy are themes that I like singing about and writing about, but it's really hard to write about what is basically nothing. Obviously, apathy doesn't apply here, but to talk about the sort of numbness and not being able to articulate feelings is really, really difficult, and I love the way that Lightbody puts it across here. I guess if I have a criticism about the book, there's an element of it that feels a bit like a literature student or like a university student. Some of the language can get a bit heady at times. It can feel a bit unnecessary, I suppose. You know, a little bit like these huge sort of metaphors and stuff that you don't really want to think about too much because I don't know how they hold up. But as I said, you know, you really get a sense of who Lightbody is, both as a person and as a songwriter. He's really not afraid to go deep into some certain places. A sequence where he's on a train, and as he's on this train, he kind of goes down memory lane, and we learn a bit about some of those formative experiences that made him get into music. His love for Nirvana, a moment where he's on stage in Tea in the Park. That was another real highlight section for me reading this book. As I said, you don't have to read this book to understand the album. The album stands on its own 2 feet perfectly well. It's a great record. But I think the book is a genuine companion piece. It's not a cash grab. It feels like it adds something. I feel like it reframed how I listened to the album. The first time round, I listened to the entire Deluxe album, and it was amazing listening to Ald and listening to the beginning and thinking, man, are these songs about Lightbody's dad? Because obviously I'd interpreted them through like a relationship lens. I think the new tracks are good. They're not necessarily tracks that I'm going to come back to in the same way that I'm going to come back to the album. And I think the book is worthy of a read if you fancy picking it up. I find it quite insightful, beautifully intimate, and I have so much respect for Gary Lightbody of really putting himself out there with both this album and this book. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're a Snow Patrol fan, I have a playlist of all of my Snow Patrol content that you might like to check out. If you're interested in me and my music, I'll be honest, I have been quiet on YouTube since the Inhaler video essay. I'm not done with YouTube, simply that my Instagram page has been growing exponentially lately. Making the short form content more about my own music has been very, very rewarding, and it has diverted a lot of my attention. I don't know when I'll be back with a video essay, but I do very much hope to be back with some new music fairly soon. It's just a case of when the studio's available. The next song I really can't wait to share with you. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and I hope to see you in another video.